Welcome one, welcome all, and we are in New Hampshire, which provided a great Xfinity race yesterday. Stats. It was actually very thrilling to watch. The chalk lineup of all three, Bell, Bowman, and was it Kvapil, did not win. It actually ended up being Custer over Bowman that ended up being in the winner there, and it was a great slate to kind of just watch. And I hope for something similar today, and we do get a chance to kind of dive into a slate where we don't have a ton of data on, similar to Xfinity, where they had to run on wet tires there for a minute, had to switch to dries after a competition caution. But here we had a very short practice, but no qualifying. And I don't even put stock into what happened in that practice. I think the most laps ran was like 6 on a short track like this. Stats, like, looks like we have to rely on history here, right?
Oh, we are definitely looking at track history. Practice, as you said, 6 or 7 laps were the cap. Some guys didn't run at all. Quite a few guys didn't run. We have qualifying. That's going to be the wacky thing here as well, right? So the qualifying didn't really happen. So this was all algorithmic qualifying, which is typically how they basically the start for the qualifying position, not for the start positions on the in the race. So this is a track, most short tracks are, we kind of look to that front row. Someone's going to get out to the lead, tough to pass. Historically, the top 2 positions, starting positions at this track have done extremely well. We're looking for those dom points. But again, the caveat here is the guy starting on the front row, not necessarily earning that front row spot. So they may not necessarily be the fastest cars that we're seeing in the race. So that's going to be Elliott and Blaney here. So, and that's the thing I think a lot of people don't realize is, they basically are doing this based on finish positions throughout the year or recent finish positions, just how good Elliott has been finish position wise. He just hasn't led a lot of laps. So, I mean, we'll get into all that. I think the other thing is rain that we've got to worry about. If you look at the weather, they've already moved the lock time up. If you haven't noticed it, lock time has been moved up to 2. And I think we're going to be okay for a couple of hours, and then we're looking to see the rain start to come in. So if you kind of look at past history on this track, then we're looking at somewhere around 60 to 70% of this race will be finished before the rain comes. So we could be looking at a shortened race. That's going to throw a monkey wrench into this as well. The other thing with the qualifying, we're not getting anyone in the back who's like a really good play necessarily, like we did yesterday in Xfinity, where we had some guys starting in the back that were kind of lock button type of plays. This is going to be it's going to be tricky. I think it's going to be a matter of we really want to focus on who could get those early laps, those dom laps. That's going to be hugely important, and who can not get lapped, as we see that often on these short tracks in the back of the pack. And then, of course, if it's rain shortened, it's going to be a lot of luck involved as far as who's on the right pitch strategy at the right time when that rain comes. So tricky week. Seems like we say that every week, but that's kind of what we're faced with. Flat track, short track. So that's what we got going on this week.
Yeah, you mentioned it. There is going to be a almost 100% chance of rain at some point during today, and it could push the race to Monday if they can't start it. But if they do start it, because I think Pockris was tweeting that they might have a window, a shortened race would definitely change the complexion a little bit. Just talk for a second on that. When you see a shortened race potentially like this, does that make you put more stock into a guy who's going to lead early like Chase Elliott this week?
Yeah, I think you have to because I think that it hurts the guys who are coming from that middle of the pack, these top drivers, the Hamlin and the Larsons. I think that's the ones that hurt because at their price point, if these guys who are starting up closer to the front dominate most of the race, then it's going to be tough for them to get a lot of dom points. It's going to be, I don't know if finish position can necessarily do it for those guys. So I think that's where it becomes a little bit tricky. And yeah, I think you do have to emphasize the guys starting up front, especially at a short track where they can accumulate a lot of laps. Now, the other monkey wrench that we have to throw into this is I think we're going to have a caution somewhere between when's that first caution coming? The competition caution, 25 or 30 laps.
Apparently, they're not going to do a competition.
Oh, are they not doing one? Okay.
Yeah, I'm shocked too because they said this yesterday, and this made me mad. Stats. Yesterday, they said there wouldn't be one, and sure enough, I thought they said they dried pit road and everything, and sure enough, they said, "Oh, competition caution, you have to come in and put on slicks." So there's not to say that there won't be one, just because NASCAR does seem to be able to change their minds whenever. But they did say no competition caution yesterday. That's different, obviously, going from wets to slicks. Had a large part in that. But they did say no competition caution here on the schedule for today, and that was 21 minutes ago from Pockers.
Okay, good. I did not see that. So that actually makes these guys starting up front even better, because the chances there, if we got a 25-30 lap competition caution, of course, whatever happens in the pits and the chances of those guys kind of getting jumped in the pits or on a restart increase. So that is going to make the guys starting in the front row, I think, even stronger plays, which makes you uneasy, of course, with the guys who are starting in the front row. Are these the guys that we want to go heavy on? So, yeah, just very, very interesting slate, as they seem to be. That seems to be something that we say each and every week.
Yep. So obviously, weather being a major factor, we'll go ahead and hopefully we get some news closer to lock. I wouldn't even mind this being pushed to Monday, to be quite honest with you, because we can get Monday Martin Truex.
Monday Martin at a short track. Yeah, that would be lock button.
But last year we had that exact same thing. He led over 250 laps here on a Monday. The year before it was Christopher Bell, and that's a perfect segue. We are targeting JGR. Christopher Bell and Martin Truex are two of your main favorites for today. Closely behind, you got Chase Elliott starting on pole, but we'll get to the 9K range in a little bit. But I do want to focus on JGR specifically. What Truex and Bell have done over the past 2 years in the next-gen car is impressive. Bell getting the win 2 years ago, Martin Truex getting the win last year. Bell has led laps, I think, in both races. Truex led 172 laps in 2022 as well. Clearly they have, their number on this track, right? They're going to come out. They're probably going to have the best car. And history tells us it's good to bet on JGR here at New Hampshire. But you also have Denny Hamlin starting 14th after an up and down run last week. Absolutely could not believe what was happening with Denny, where he even got lapped inside that first stage. Kyle Larson being the fastest car by a mile last time out and crashing out in the race due to Daniel Suarez getting into his backside there. I don't know what to make of Hendrick here stats. They haven't been great here. I think Elliott and Larson have combined for the two top 10s in the last 2 years in the next-gen car at New Hampshire, which not exactly promising because we know the pace they can bring every week, but Chase Elliott did get second here not too long ago. So there shows that you can definitely move up in the pack, definitely hold position if you got a car that's good enough. What are you doing with the 19th place Larson, and then dive into the JGR guys afterwards?
Yeah, like I said, I think the rain shortened is going to hurt Larson maybe the most in this race because he's starting 19. I think it gives him less opportunity to get up front. Now, listen, it's Kyle Larson, and I don't care what the track is, the type of track. He's going to get his way up to the front. Now, we suggested possibly wanting to fade him last week because of the unusual situation. We had a track that we didn't really know a lot about. He was starting up front, chance for tire blowout. It wound up being really probably partially his fault there on the wreck. And we got lucky there. So we had some shots at the big one. I had a top 10 in there. And so I don't know necessarily if we're in that situation. I don't expect him necessarily to get himself in a wreck in this race. I'm just more concerned with the rain. In my builds currently, I did not adjust for that, and I've got him over or right about where we're expecting the market to be. I may pull back on that when the show ends and reassess. I'm going to look at the weather some more, but I think I think the guys it really hurts is going to be Larson and Hamlin because of where they are starting. But when you talk about JGR, I mean, let's just talk. I'm going to bring up. I was just looking at it, right? So the last 2 years at this track. All right, those top guys: Truex, Hamlin, Bell, two first place finishes, and we've got 5 out of 6 finished in the top 7.
Yep.
So I mean, they've just been unstoppable at this track. And then the best comp that you could look for at this track is going to be Richmond, and go look at what they all did at Richmond this year. So a first for Hamlin, you had a 4th and a 6th place for the other two guys, and they pretty much dominated that race. And if you go back to the previous year at Richmond. Really strong finish for Bell as well. So there's a reason JGR are the favorites this week for teams by a long margin. They are the big favorites, and of course they're pushing the Toyotas to be the favorites as well for the manufacturers. So yeah, I mean, listen, Bell's the favorite to win the race. He won last week. Bell, I worry about Bell as a favorite. It seems like Bell is the guy who kind of when he's a favorite and he's starting up top will disappoint. When you don't expect him to win, he's going to win for you. He starts in the 4th spot this week. I mean, as the favorite, I think you have to give him respect, but I think we can look at this race again in a similar, not that I'm expecting a similar type of outcome for the same reasons, but I think we could fade a little bit of, if you want to take a stand here in a 20 max, you're either going to take a stand on locking in a player or a driver, or you're going to take a stand on fading a driver. And obviously that's going to go. I think the toughest thing is to totally fade a guy who's the chalk. That's going to be a little bit riskier. But if you're going to do it, I could see doing it here with maybe a Bell who is the favorite to win the race. But that star position at a track where maybe he doesn't get the lead, and these guys, Blaney and or Elliott, really dominate a lot of these early laps, and Bell doesn't get a chance to lead all these laps early. Perhaps someone starting 4th where he's not going to really get any benefit of place differential and not get any dom points. Maybe Bell finds his way out of it and not able to, with a full race, not able to get any dom points. So I would look there as a potential fade. I think, Truex to me, I feel a little bit more confident in than Bell. So I've got Truex a lot stronger. I think Truex can listen. Bell obviously as the favorite can get up to the lead here early in this race, but I'm going to look towards if I'm looking at these two guys who I think are going to be pretty similar in ownership. I kind of like Truex over Bell, and then if we go down, if we're looking at all these guys in the 10K, I think you got to talk about Blaney in the same breath that we talk about Elliott. Now, if you're playing 20 maxes or 20 bills, 3 maxes, I would kind of avoid playing Blaney and Elliott together. In 150 bills, I'll have them both because maybe they kind of chop up the dom points and both find their way into the nuts. I think if you're playing certainly like one lineup or 3, I would kind of avoid playing both of these guys together. But I have a feeling that either Blaney or Elliott will dom quite a bit here early. I think one of that, it's kind of historically the way it's gone. I know a lot of that has to do with the fact that those qualifying the best and practicing the best often are the pole sitter. But and Elliott really has not led a lot of laps this year. I just have a feeling Elliott or Blaney will be able to hold the lead at the early part of this race and find their way into the winning lineup, because I think we're going to have a shortened race.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. And I do just want to point out that, yes, Truex to me is one of the best plays in the slate. I think pairing him with Bell, pairing up the teammates even is fine. I'm actually going to have Hamlin as the odd man out purely because kind of similar to what you said about the rain. I know the rain being a little bit short in there, but also didn't love the way he looked last week. And Truex and Bell have been better at this track just in general. Bell, obviously, this is his favorite track, I would say, from the Xfinity Series, where he has 4 straight wins and 4 straight starts at the Xfinity Series at New Hampshire, which I know that was just absurd. Obviously, he got the win here in 2022 as well in the Cup Series. You just have guys with talent coming in here, guys with a little bit of history, and we know that Truex and Bell have both of those, and those are 2 of my favorites just on the slate, and for good reason. I mean, we know they're in a fast car. The history is behind them. We don't have a lot of practice data to kind of go against that, which if you're leaning more into like large field tournaments, I don't know what the reward is on like fading a guy like Truex, where you mentioned it perfectly. This made my solidification even better. Stats is when you said Richmond's a great track comp. Well, who led 244 laps at Richmond? Truex. So I know Truex has been very up and down this season. I mean, running out of gas on the road course when he was going to be optimal last week, only getting 15th. It's obviously not the most exciting play this season, but the one track that he was able to do it this year was Richmond. He can do it again this race here. Absolutely buying in on him. Larson started on pole here, or started on pole at Richmond. Got 144 laps. If you just want to do a track comp there, the fastest car by a mile stats. Like, it wasn't even close last week. if he brings any sort of pace like that, I mean, good luck. The problem is, I want to buy in on JGR. I want to buy in on Bell. I want to buy in on Truex. What that does is you have to pick two of those three. And you can't fit all three unless you really want to dig down into that terrible value range. And to me, for my main lineup right now, for my single entry, Larson's the odd man out. And I don't love it. But, hopefully for good reason, JGR just kind of stays dominant. Like what you said about Blaney, we've seen, the guy in second, we just saw it 2 weeks ago with Cindric. Over Logano that ended up being the winner, and obviously Cindric ended up winning the race. But not having to go with the pole sitter there at a little bit of a discounted ownership, I think a lot more people are going to gravitate to a far cheaper Chase Elliott. Look at this ownership. This is Sabres ownership. I would expect it to be more like 40-25, but you're almost getting half the ownership on Blaney than you are on Chase Elliott, and that's a great leverage play there. But yeah, I think you summed it up great. I think we can even move on down to the 9K range. And I also wanted to just say Bell's 22nd to start yesterday and won. It was like plus 125 to win. The starting position didn't really matter there.
No, it wasn't. I wasn't talking about starting position. I was talking more of when he's a favorite in there. Yeah. But yeah, and in Xfinity, listen, starting that far, that was a pretty, I don't want to say easy play. I mean, I only had him like 50%, but yeah, it's a different situation.
Yeah, it's very different. I like comparing Xfinity to like how sometimes the races go, but as far as like an individual, talent, there's like 10 cars that can win from week to week. Like, or I would even say it's more like 4 or 5. Bell obviously was a top 3 car yesterday. That was a great finish, though. I don't want to. Custer did end up in the winner, which I didn't expect at all. But there is some surprises there. But let me see if there's any other comments here. This track is a lot of tire wear. I like the drivers to take care of their drivers. Yeah, I mean, you saw, I think yesterday they were debating on whether to pit or not. And this is what helped Kvapil a lot. Was he pitted very late, didn't have to come into the pits right after, that caution came out right after he pit. It's about like 15, 16 laps they were saying is when the tire fallout begins. So yes, you definitely want guys who can take care of their tires, especially on long green flag runs. 9K range stats. I am not jumping out of my seat for anyone here. Elliott is the guy, but I can keep it short and sweet. You play Elliott, you're hoping for down points early. You're trying to get that first stage specifically. Hell, a rain shortened race with him getting 5th and he led, 50, 60 laps. You're taking that all day. Problem is not really any practice data. I don't love Hendrick on the track, but he did get a second place finish here. I want to say it was 2022 or 2023. I can't pin it right now, but he did get a top 3 finish here, obviously. That's fine. That's good. It shows he has a little bit of history, but these other guys, I'm going to be selling Logano. I'm going to be selling on Byron. I'm going to be selling on Keselowski, and really Elliott's the only one I'm going to have in this range at all. What about you?
It's interesting range. I know we talked about Elliott, so I'll just kind of rehash what I said there. Again, I expect one of these guys, I think either Elliott or Blaney, to be able to lead a lot of laps. I agree with where if you want to pivot off of one and go with Blaney to get the lesser ownership, I'm cool with that. But I do think it's going to be one of these two that dominate at least early in the race. And, take a look at the markets as well on who wins stage 1. I think I haven't looked at it since sport, but I think Elliott is still up there. Maybe the 3rd or 4th choice to win stage 1. So that's not terrible as far as the betting markets are concerned, that he can dominate at least early in this race. Logano is going to be an interesting. I mean, Logano, look at his. You talk about the recent history, just at the flat tracks this year. And if we talk about Richmond being a good comp, 2nd place at Richmond, right? He had a 6th place, 5th place, and a 6th place. Iowa, Gateway. Maybe those tracks aren't necessarily going to be as comparable necessarily as Richmond is, but pretty good track history here as well in New Hampshire. He's got a 2nd last year, 4th place finish in 21, 4th place finish in 20. Maybe one of the only guys who maybe has a better track history is in this range as well, and that's going to be Keselowski, who's finished in the last 4 years 5th, 7th, 3rd, and 1st at this track. So the question becomes, both of these guys starting up in the top 10, Logano at 6th, Keselowski at 9th. Can they get up to the front? Can they dominate? I'm not sure if they necessarily need to. If a Keselowski is able to finish first or second or something like that at 9K. Perhaps if the Dom points don't really get spread out among two of the top drivers and it's only one, perhaps a strong finish here from Keselowski can get us into the winning lineup. I think he's going to be fairly low owned. I think Logano, though, is the guy for me. I think he's one of the guys who kind of goes overlooked. I think he's going to I like a strong finish from Logano, and I like the ownership that is going to be a little depressed there. So he's I'm kind of looking for, I think, the long shot kind of play or the less owned play to be either one of these guys up at the top who I think can necessarily maybe get to the lead some laps. We know Logano can do that. Or we're taking a flyer here on someone in the back of the pack that's not, you got to hope that they're not going to get lapped, which is going to happen with a lot of these crappy drivers in the back. So I think Logano is one of my favorite low-owned type of plays because I think of his track history here. And he's just really quietly just seems to be in contention at these type of tracks each and every time they are out. I think Byron is really the odd man out here. My least favorite of these drivers, starting third. I just don't like him compared to some of the other drivers that we have. You know, he's got Bell starting next to him, the two guys in front of him. I just don't see him being able to jump out in front, which he's going to have to do and dominate laps. And I don't like his win odds either compared to the other guys in this group. He's really the third choice of this 9K range. So I just don't see enough Dom points or the potential to win to really like Byron.
I muted myself there. Sorry. Yes, I'm with you completely on Byron. I actually love the case that you made on Logano there. Looking at that history and stuff, there's absolutely a path to where he can get up there into the front, potentially even lead some laps or just have a very strong finishing position as well. When you look at ownership too, just kind of scrolling over to the right here, you're getting him at maybe under 20% as well. Great tournament option. I'll join you on Logano. I won't join you on Keselowski just because, I think the upside is higher with Logano just based on history and obviously performance this season. You're right. Flat tracked. I mean, even at Martinsville, when he took two tires and was able to hold the lead in the front, obviously this is not a similar, a very direct similar, but you're talking about just flat tracks, kind of flat, shortish tracks where he's been thriving on this year. And even the All-Star race at Wilkesboro and stuff too. Richmond, you mentioned it. He's been a lot better than I gave him credit for coming in. So I do like that a lot. Let's see here, going into the 8K range now. We got a decent range, right? We'll get to Kyle Busch in a second, but we'll, from Barry on up to Reddick, you have tournament options here. Gibbs starting 18th, he's on the team that we really want to target. However, his performances here haven't been really incredible by any means. Even the Xfinity Series, I think he finished outside the top 20 in 2022, which I don't know. I'm a little uneasy about Gibbs. Reddick has a lot of talent, got sixth place here in his most recent outing. Ross Chastain 8th, Buescher 15th. I mean, RFK, if you're wanting to bet on Keselowski, you can definitely bet on Buescher. Bowman's a fade for me starting 5th. Josh Berry continues to kind of perform. He looked really good last week again. And I know he ended up getting into it a little bit, I think, late on, where it ended up costing him his race a little bit. But he was looking almost like a stone lock for optimal until that happened. But you have a lot of options here in the 8K range, none that are just top of the shelf, locks or anything like that, but some tournament plays, right, Stats?
Yeah, I think all these guys are tournament plays. I think we're looking at a fairly low-owned group in this 8K range, and you kind of get the feeling one of these guys will be able to pop into the winning lineup. It's just a matter of obviously figuring out which one it is. I think if we want to eliminate one of these guys, I think Bowman is the guy that you would kind of toss out. His odds to win the first stage for a guy starting in the 5th spot are way too high for me. So that's basically telling me that, the betting market just doesn't think he's going to be able to dominate this race early. And of course, his win odds aren't, all that impressive either. So a guy who's not going to win, not dominate early, starting in the 5th. So of all these guys, I think we could kind of toss him out. Reddick's been fairly, kind of top 10 for most of the races on the short tracks this year, except for the last race out last week at Iowa. So, starting in the 11th spot or 12th spot, I should say, he's not getting a ton of ownership. As I said, no one really in this range will be getting a ton of ownership. interesting play. I don't know if his upside is all that great. I don't see any of these guys really being able to win this race. I don't foresee that at least. Ty Gibbs, JGR, that's been hit or miss. I mean, has there been a guy where more people, and we see it in the chat every week, it's like everyone wants to be on Ty Gibbs every week, and now it feels like everyone wants to jump off Ty Gibbs because he's just disappointed us so much. But you've got a JGR car. I think we've said this a million times, but you've got a JGR car here. He's obviously the cheapest guy of the JGRs. Is this a week he kind of pops for us? You've got pretty good place differential at 18th, starting at the 18th spot. He'll probably be the highest owned in this group. I don't think it's a terrible play. I mean, just with the success that his team has at this track, and the 18th starting spot for 8,700, I don't think it's an awful play at all to get in on some Gibbs. Chastain is interesting. I mean, that's going to be a super low owned guy starting 8th. I mean, do I think he gets up to the front? Probably not. But if he does get up to the front, he's one of those guys who will be tough to pass, doesn't like to get past. And if he gets up to the front, he can accumulate a lot of lead laps. I think it's someone in your 150 builds that you definitely want to mix in. I think you probably want to mix him in, maybe a lineup or two on your 20 max builds as well, just for that outside shot that he does get us some Dom points. And then you look at Josh Berry. I mean, how good has he been at these type of tracks? You're right. I mean, Berry should have been a much better finish for him last week.
And I didn't realize he got set. So he actually recovered there and ended up still being in the winner.
Was he in the winner? Where did he wind up finishing? Because he was I know he finished top 10.
He had 32 laps led and 18 fastest laps.
He's good. I mean, now, the price is getting a little bit more expensive for a Berry, but I think he's still in play. I think at that price and starting 10th, again, that's going to depress the ownership. I think we're looking at all these guys maybe sub 20%. And certainly Bowman will be, sub 10%. But I think Berry just you have to like what you've seen from him at these type of tracks to take a guy at 8K who I think has the potential to finish really high here. I mean, again, if the race does get shortened and tough to pass, he gets to move up. I think we can see Berry in the winner again as well. So I think there's a few of these guys. I think they're strictly GPP plays. We don't have any real cash plays in this group, but I think some flyers that I like. I think guys that you have to mix in. I think you have to mix in some Berry and some Chastain. I think Gibbs for sure. You're going to want to have in some lineups. Bowman is the only guy I would kind of throw out, but I think Gibbs, Chastain, Berry, the ones I like maybe the most here, and then some Reddick and Buescher. If you want to sprinkle them in as well, but maybe you don't need those two guys in your 20 max builds.
So it was not Berry in the winner. It was Stenhouse who had 70 points. So Berry did not end up being in the 100K winner there, which incredible. Berry ended up getting in the second place lineup with 49.1 fantasy points. So like you said, I mean, Berry's probably been honestly straight up over the last month or so, Berry's been better than Gibbs. I never would have thought I'd be saying that even just a month ago at all. But what we have seen from Berry is absolutely promising. So can absolutely buy in on Berry again at this type of track. Gibbs, he's the closest one who was looking about making my main team stats. It was him and Reddick, just because I was in that price range before. I was like, I'm going to scrap it. I'm going to try and find a new angle. Because I just didn't love this range for single entry and stuff. But I think for tournaments, you do have multiple paths for a bunch of these guys where they're able to improve their position. If they're able to get to the front somehow, guys like Reddick and Gibbs can get a top 5 and be optimal. Chastain can, get a lead and hold a lead without a doubt. Berry's been impressive. You have a lot of paths for these guys, but probably the easiest path in the slate is this 7K range. And I got to say, Stats, I'm very bullish on it. We start off with Kyle Busch starting 30th. He's got, great, odds for, just moving up and winning this race, right? Not that he's going to do that at all, but his odds compared to the field are very easy to kind of just gravitate toward. However, when you just look at, below him, I love Bubba Wallace. I love, Chase Briscoe. I think Gragson is fine. I think Cindric is fine. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drivers who are absolutely viable. I think my main team is going to have 2, maybe 3 guys here stats. And Bubba Wallace over the last 2 races here, 3rd place and 8th place. So I didn't have the expectation to come in loving Bubba Wallace, but here I am. And I think that if he gets top 10, which is certainly capable of, then he might be able to do it. And his odds also incredible. It's 40-1, I think, to win the race as of this morning, which it's better than Kyle Busch. Actually, I didn't expect that, which kind of puts him up into that top dozen of cars, which they're kind of showing that he can move up in this pack. History shows that he's done well here. Briscoe, a guy who can just wheel his way up, into the top, 15, top 12 if needed. I'm willing to buy on talent here. And I think, Briscoe definitely has it. Gregson definitely has it. Bubba willing to buy on 17th. Let's go ahead and, have you talk about the 7K range. But first, I completely forgot to mention this. I meant to bring it up in the first thing stats. The MLB product at Run Pure Sports. My God. I wanted to say I counted, and this was just on 2 days. I counted over 20, 25 4-figure screenshots from members. Shout out to Steve Boynton. Boynton has absolutely crushed it this week. JVC, you've crushed it. JVC's crushed it. You've crushed it. Stats. JT's crushed it. DC's crushed it. And everyone else. I don't want to forget anyone, but like AP, I know all them working hard. But the MLB content has been second to none. I know that one of my personal friends, he loves using the content. He won about 16K this week. And that was 2 of his 3 biggest hits in DFS. And he's been playing for 8 years. Came over the past, week. It's incredible how it works, right? 2 of the 3 biggest. Anyone who tells you heaters aren't real, no, heaters are 100% real. I don't know what it is, but they all come in bunches. And Boynton right now is on an absolute heater. JT has won, I want to say 50 or 60 grand over the last couple weeks. Stats, you guys have won over,
it's got to be a couple hundred. Yeah, it's big. It's got to be a couple 100,000 at least. Well, there was a big WNBA hit, a big MMA hit yesterday. 3 big wins this week for MLB. A golf showdown win. Yep. So yeah, it's been a big week. K Fallick had a 50K hit this week as well. Right. Baseball's been ridiculous. It's been ridiculous winners. Baltimore. That's why Boynton's been winning, because Baltimore's been been scoring a ton of runs this week. So his boys have been making him some money. Yeah, it's been crazy. And then if anyone's in the betting, we've got a bet side at Run Pure as well. I've hit 23 of the last 25K props in MLB. So that's been quite the run as well. So yeah, like you said, when the heaters come, man, they come quick. So you got to take advantage of them when they come, because you spend a lot of time kind of treading water, if not, those bad weeks where you get your ass handed to you. So when you get the good heaters going, you got to make the most of it. So that's what's been going on right now. We're in the midst of it. Hopefully we can keep that going.
So let's go ahead and just have some fun here, because you said 23 out of the last 25K props, which is just absurd. I just kind of want to, give a hint out here of, what your odds do. I wish I would share my screen, but really just kind of, for example, you have posted 3K props today. You have Nick Lodolo under 7.5Ks, and at worst you would bet it at -155, but on Caesars Sportsbook it's -123. Kikuchi under 5.5, you'd bet it at worst at -145, which that is on DraftKings right now. So you said if that blind moved to -150, probably wouldn't touch it. And lastly, Jonathan Cannon for the Chicago White Sox under 4.5Ks, -157, and you wouldn't bet it at -170. So that's kind of nice to know. And you also post these every day. We also have a lot of posts, like Boynton just posted that. I don't know if I want to.
No, don't even announce that. That's got to go.
I'm not announcing that one.
Yeah,
no.
you got to give that one. If you're in the Discord, you get that info. If not, you're gonna miss it. But
that one.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna place that bet while you talk about that 7K right
here. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, no, back to the NASCAR. I think the guy who's going to be of the most interest here is going to be Kyle Busch. I mean, he gets starting 30th. Because of just how bad he's been. We talked about it, kind of the algorithm picked where these guys are going to be starting. And because he's been so terrible as of late, he gets to start in the 30th spot and winds up becoming probably the best place differential play on the slate. So now it becomes a question of, do you believe in Kyle Busch? And do you believe the fact that, he's been so bad as of recent that he's going to be able to rebound here? I mean, the last 2 times out doesn't finish. And you look at his track history here in the next gen, he had a 36th as well, which I would assume was a did not finish DNF there, and then a 12th place finish. So it's scary. I threw him in my core. I think a couple of us did. I don't know if it was you or Big T had him in the core, or if we all did. We may have all done that.
We all cored Kyle Busch. That's the play of the day.
It's absolutely disgusting. And
Yeah.
when I was doing it, I'm like, all right, well, at least I got the other guys with me on that core play and just where he's going. But I mean, they've dropped the price on him. You've got, the best driver down start at this kind of starting position. If you want to argue and tell me that you are going to not play Kyle Busch, I am not going to argue with you. But I've got to. I just can't pass up on it. If I'm the sucker, I'm the sucker. So I'll be in on the Kyle Busch mess that is today. And let's face it, there's a chance Kyle Busch gets lapped in this race. Anybody starting down here. I mean, basically the half of the field will get lapped. Will not finish on the front lap. So if you are starting in the 30s, there's a good probability that you could get lapped here. I'm just going to hope that Kyle Busch is not going to be one of those guys. Bubba Wallace, I think we talked about a little bit, and I know a lot of people kind of like Bubba Wallace. I think it's going to move his ownership up a little bit. He should be into maybe the mid-20s. Again, we've got a pretty decent starting position. You look at how he's done. I think you mentioned it, an 8th place finish and a 3rd place finish here. Those were in the next gen. In this next gen car, which is significant. So we always like to look at kind of the last 2 years at all of these tracks, and they've been impressive performances. So for someone at his start position of 17th with easily top 10, maybe even top 5 potential, I do like some Bubba Wallace myself. You look at SHR with the next 2 guys, you got Gragson and Briscoe. This is really the best, probably the best tracks for SHR, but not necessarily the best tracks for Gragson. He has not been all that great on these short flat tracks. So I kind of lean, if I'm going to lean to the 2, I think Briscoe to me has the more upside. Just kind of looking at the betting markets. I mean, it's not a huge difference in the betting markets. Briscoe is slightly favored over Gragson, but I think for the ownership, which I think is going to be fairly similar, if we're looking, I don't know where you've got the projections up, but what's the ownership on these guys, at least for Sabre, what they're looking for? It should be fairly close, I would think.
Yeah, so you're seeing a lot of like 20% around that range for these guys here.
I think it's going to be, so Sabre, we've got, I think Gragson winds up being a little higher than that. Yeah. And I think Briscoe a little higher as well. I think Bubba's going to be 25. So I think all 3 of these guys wind up being higher. So yeah, I mean, if the ownership was exactly as Sabre has it, maybe I'd lean a little bit more Gragson, but I think they're going to be a little closer, which is putting me a little bit more on the Briscoe side of this. So if I had to choose, if I was kind of picking and I needed someone at this price range, I think I would lean more on Briscoe and his better track history. And then you've got Cindric. I think, Cindric, to me, I don't love. I know he's starting 29th. He's got the win at Gateway, and I think that's that was a fluky situation. I would not really put a lot of weight into that win that Cindric had over at Gateway. You look at where he's finished here recently. He's got 25th last year, 13th. Starts 29th. Not going to be high owned. I mean, strictly a GPP flyer for me, but probably my least favorite of this group. I think these other guys are all much more playable in the 7K range.
And that's a testament to this range too. Like Cindric starting 29th is better than Priest starting 31st, but because of that, 400 price difference, a lot of it matters. I set my min salary to 49 too, but I'm probably going to raise that just because I think each of these studs are extremely important. I think the 7K range is, very important to get right. Like, I don't know if I'd want to go Priest over Cindric, but I would go, Briscoe and, guys like that, where I'm extremely high on the 7K range. Like Briscoe and Wallace, probably my main team on Busch. Like, you're going to have just a lot of upside with those guys. A lot of guys can, improve their position. I like what, Izzy said. Briscoe was fast last week until he had issues. That's what I like to hear. Garrett asked, you're prioritizing Bell and Marty over Larson. Personally, I am. Stats made a great case, though, too, where, if the rain comes, that's not going to help Larson at all. If that rain comes in and only 60% of this race gets finished, that's probably going to shaft Larson more than the others because he needs to not only move up, but he also needs to kind of put up in the down points, and those guys are going to have a much better chance of doing so early on than Larson having to move through the pack like that. I also did want to kind of mention this. We got Uncle T in the chat. And we also have Mangone. Is the race going to go on time, or is the rain going to move it? It's going to go on time, but it's probably not going to finish, 100% of the race. There's a lot of rain in the area. Uncle T made sure to mention a Golf Showdown shipper. And we also, Baldy and the Oaf, there's some easy money to be made on NASCAR Pick 6 on DraftKings. It's the first week for NASCAR Pick 6 on DraftKings. Be sure to sign up there. And I know I think some people in Discord were posting props like, you can get under 28.5, like Kyle Busch, or 20.5 Kyle Busch laps led on your Pick 6. Seems like a pretty good thing to include in your parlays. So should be fun. Let's go ahead and move on down to the 6K range now, though. This is where my fun stops. My favorite, play is Justin Haley in this range. I think Ryan Preece is not too far behind, but I don't get excited by anyone else. I think McDowell's fine, but really Haley has just been turning on the Jets. I mean, this whole season, I doubted him the first 2-3 months. Like I said last week, I'm done doubting him. And what you're seeing here is a guy with legit pace who is driving a car that probably doesn't belong to be driven in the top 15 a lot. And here he is driving it there. I really like Haley this week, starting 24th. The price is finally starting to creep up, even just slightly. Preece profiles is a track that he should do well on. Hasn't really done well here, in the Cup Series, that is. McDowell starting 25th. I'd rather have Cindric. I'd rather have Preece straight up. But really, not a whole lot to get excited for outside Haley and maybe Preece for these stats. What about you?
I think you're kind of forgetting Hocevar in here.
Am I? Because I guess he's starting to get down to 6,300. And he was uber popular there for the start of the season, right? And this time they're expecting 20%, which, probably fair, right?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think it'd be 20 to 25%. I mean, I think he's got upside of, somewhere between 10 to 15. I think he could get into the low teens type of upside. Starting 20th at this price, I think is going to be fine. So I do like Hocevar here. And the guy that you mentioned that I don't really like much is Preece. I just think Preece has not been fast. I don't think I just think the equipment that he's in is not very good. I see Preece getting lapped in this race. I would he's a guy that I don't mind kind of leaving out of your lineups in whatever your builds are going to be. 150, I got to kind of mix everybody in because this could be a bit of a mess. But man, if I'm building 20 maxes and 3 maxes, Preece is not a guy for me. You're right though. This is kind of a weak range. I do like what you said with Haley though. Haley's been quiet, and look at the last 2 trips out on these short flat tracks. Top 15 finishes in both. So I think Haley is one of those guys we could get some leverage, could be low owned. So I do like him. I don't know where they've got him. Are we looking at projections, or no, you're looking at projections, not ownership, but I think Haley's going to be fairly low owned, right? Probably in the teens, mid-teens, something like that.
On his ownership. I don't think he's going to be. I think the secret's out on him. I think he's just jammed in every week at this point. I don't think it's going to be 7. I think it's going to be closer to 15. That's
what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like 15 to 20. But I like Haley there. Yeah, I think that's a little low for where they have him. I think Stenhouse and Dylan are 2 guys that we could toss out. I mean, Stenhouse is getting the 13th. He's starting up at 13th strictly because he had that race last week, which was really good. There's just no reason to play a Stenhouse here at 13. And I think the same thing for Dylan. I think I can pass on Dylan and Suarez as well in this range. Starting 11th, I think is way too high for a Daniel Suarez. So those are 3 guys I think you kind of leave out of your lineups. But I think the one guy I missed here is Gilliland. Now he starts high, right? But he's been pretty strong. If you let's look at his recent finishes. He got a 12th, 16th, 13th, all at these short flat tracks. So, Gilliland, again, GPP type of play. I could see you definitely want to get him in the mix as well. So I think I'm not going to go crazy on any of these guys. I'm not huge. I'm not way overweight. Sounds like I like Hocevar more than you do, and don't like Preece at all. Where you may be playing a little bit of Preece. But other than that, I think you're going to be sprinkling in the guys. Basically, let's eliminate Suarez from me. Let's eliminate Suarez. Let's eliminate Dylan. Eliminate Stenhouse. I would eliminate Preece as well. And then the other guys you're kind of mixing in with Hocevar, probably the best play. and then Gilliland and Haley for me.
Yeah, I do overlook. You just look at the 4 most recent races, 21st or better in all of those, and that includes the top 10 with an 8th place finish, 14th last week too. I shouldn't have ignored Hocevar. Hocevar has been just really stout over the last month. Do like that call there. You have some, in the chat here, Priest, has a ton of modified laps at New Hampshire here.
Mm-hmm.
Priest's hometown narrative, and obviously, I would think it's his wheelhouse too. He just really hasn't shown it this year, and
I just don't think he's got the equipment to do it. So I that's what I'm worried about here. So I think Priest finishes a few laps down.
So I want to play a game before we get into the 6K range, and it goes with Sean Smith's question here about potential DOMs highlighted on the playbook now. I want to play a game though. Denny Hamlin, potential DOM, yes or no?
Denny Hamlin, yeah, of course.
And would you include Kyle Larson in a DOM group as well?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously both of those guys can be DOMs. Again, we talked about it. The rain shorten may change that a bit. I just think it's tricky when you're doing NASCAR builds. Like you put these guys in as a DOM, and then like if you have them in your DOM group and you have one, and you're like, you want at least one DOM, and that's your only DOM in the line. Yeah. I don't know if that's the way you want to go. So I think almost leaving those guys out of your DOM is kind of the way to go, because I really think you want to have one of these guys starting up front.
Yep.
I just can't see someone in the top, let's say 5, 6 that are not going to be in the winner. So I think you probably get at least one, maybe even 2 guys starting up close to the front that are going to be in the winner this week.
All right, so one last question here, because I know a lot of people play, DFS and stuff, might be new to an optimizer. Would you do a max of 2 starting inside the top 10 this week?
I would do at least 1.
Yeah, at least 1, max 2.
Max 2. Yeah. I think you could do max 2. Yeah, at least 1, max 2.
Cool. Okay, so we're on the same page there. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and finish off this show with the 5K range here. Eric Jones. He is the one to kind of just look for here. 32nd. This has actually been one of his better tracks here, stats. I didn't want to come in playing Eric Jones, but I am going to be this week. It was, very close between him and Haley. I think I used that extra 100. We'll see, but Eric Jones has been very good at, New Hampshire. You also have Ty Dillon starting last. You got Zane Smith, who I honestly don't think he's put any laps here at New Hampshire competitively. But really, outside of Eric Jones, I don't really love this range. Even then, I don't really see a need to go to this range too, because what I mentioned earlier. I love the 7K range. If I like the mid tier, probably don't need to just be bashing in the 5K range. It's been kind of a theme all year where the 5K range just hasn't popped a ton. And I've been playing maybe one driver there, at most in most lineups. Haley now being above that 6K range, it just kind of emphasizes itself. I think I would have at most one guy below 6K in my lineups. What about you?
I agree with that. And I do think we're going to find someone potentially here below the 6K that makes its way in. It's going to really depend on who gets those DOM points. I mean, that's always what it comes down to. And, I just think that we're going to have a couple of these guys close to that 10K range. We like that other range there in that kind of that 7K range that we like, and maybe we'll get a couple of guys there. I think we're going to get, I agree with you. I think you're going to want 1 maximum here. So if you're setting your optimizer build, I think you do 1 max of this 5K range. There's no one that really stands out. You say Jones, he's definitely the best option, has a pretty good history at this track, but his recent history has not been good since he's come back from the injury. Has not looked good at all. So if we're going to go strictly on track history, he definitely has some good results here. He had an 11th place finish last year at this track. So outside of that, nobody here has finished well. And historically, traditionally, short tracks, it's tough for these really bad teams and bad drivers to have strong finishes at these short tracks, because as we mentioned, real easy to get lapped. You expect just about everyone in this group to get lapped. It's going to take something crazy where if we get a lot of cautions and we get someone who just gets on a wacky pit strategy when the rain comes and finds himself with a 15th finish. Something like that can easily happen. So I think I'm not really Xing any of these guys out. I like what you're saying. I'll just kind of mix in one max. I don't think we'll see two of these guys, but I think a one max, if you're building certainly 150 lineups, is the way to go.
Love it. Love it. Let's go ahead and get into our drivers of the day, and then we'll head on out of here. You know the rules. Under 20% has our rule here. So let's go ahead and see. We're using Sabres ownership. So if you see anyone below 20% stats, by all means. So you're as Carson Hostfar and up are the ineligible drivers for us here today. I think I already know mine, but who is your driver of the day under 20% on Sabres ownership projection?
I'm going with Logano as my guy. So like I said, I was either going to go someone starting up front at low ownership or someone starting in the back. I have a tough time finding someone in the back that I really like at low ownership that I feel confident in. I don't feel all that. Sometimes I feel really good about these plays. This is not one of those weeks, but he's just been sneaky good at these type of tracks. And I could see, getting overweight here and possibly finding him out front, leading a whole bunch of laps and being in the nuts at this low ownership.
Love it. I think we're going to be kind of skirting the system here because I'm going the next guy below 20%, and that was Bubba Wallace. Really like what he's done over the last 2 years here. Big proponent of track history being the main thing that we can rely on. When you get a third and an eighth at 7.5K, you have great odds to win the race in your range. I don't need much. I just think that, top 12 is very much in the cards. I think a top 10, could be a bet if I see it on DraftKings or FanDuel here. I'm going to pull it up here shortly after this. But we also have a ton of stuff posted in our props chat. We also have NASCAR that's clicking. We have a full playbook and cores and everything like that for NASCAR as well. Code RPS15, 15% off your first payment. Thank you all for joining us and good luck today and bye-bye.